Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe on this Thursday. Going to be talking about Ben Chilwell, his first interview as a Chelsea player. The announcement was made last night by the club, but I felt some of his quotes last night were really interesting, so we're going to get into some of that as well. Lampard's influence in the transfer once again, also how positively Chilwell can impact Chelsea next season and why the Blues have signed him from Leicester this summer, and also Chelsea's first pre-season friendly has been confirmed, so we're going to get into that as well later in the video. But before we do, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also hit that like button if you're enjoying the content, because it helps out the channel as well. Let's get into Ben Chilwell's first interview. He gave it last night. Of course, there was a lot of sort of content released by the club from Ben Chilwell, his interview sort of about him, and there was a cool announcement video which very much leaned into the Chili Bee trend that's been going on with social media and Chelsea fans recently, that I thought was a pretty good announcement video by Chelsea standards for transfers, to be honest. But his actual interview was really intriguing. I think a lot of the things he said, which we're going to get into, I felt were very enlightening to the way he feels about coming to Chelsea, the way Lampard has spoken to him once again, and I think that very much continues a trend we've seen with Lampard and transfers that I think is only going to continue, and I think is really exciting for Chelsea once again. Firstly, what did Ben Chilwell have to say on Frank Lampard's influence? This is what he had to say. Massively important. Obviously wanted to play for a massive club. That's what everyone wants for their whole career. Talking to Frank before I came was one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Chelsea. He instilled a lot of confidence in me, told me how much the system suits the way I play, and just seemed like a really good guy. You can talk to stuff away from football, and I think that's very important for a young player. Then he talked about Ashley Cole, the influence of Ashley Cole on his career, and the fact that Ashley Cole, of course, played for Chelsea and was a brilliant player for the club. He said, I grew up watching Ashley Cole play, so I know how respected he is here. And again, that was a big reason for me wanting to come. I'm still young and I want that sort of career he had at Chelsea for myself. And lastly, on Frank Lampard's system suiting Ben Chilwell's game, this is what he had to say. This system really suits me when I watch Chelsea play and I look at the fullbacks, and I think that's perfect for me. That's my game down to a T. So firstly, Lampard's influence, once again, massive in convincing a player to join Chelsea. We've seen this now with Hakim Ziyech saying exactly the same when he joined the club. Timo Werner, Ben Chilwell. We've heard that Kai Havertz was massively convinced by Frank Lampard why he wanted to join Chelsea from Leverkusen this summer. This seems to be a continuing trend, and whatever Frank Lampard is saying to these players, because of course we aren't privy to those conversations, but I think it's really exciting to think about what Lampard is telling them in terms of the system, in terms of the plans he has for Chelsea next season, and why these players fit into his system. I think it's a lot different to other coaches recently, where you feel like maybe the transfers that the coaches at the time are getting are quite disconnected from the coach's vision themselves. But Frank Lampard is so integrated now with these transfer negotiations and really talking to these players, convincing them, selling them the vision and project of Chelsea, which is so integral, I think, to the modern game now. Players aren't just going to come to your club because, you know, you're a big club or you're going to give them a lot of money. I think especially at the top level, they want to be sold a vision. Young players want to be told what they're fitting into, why they are so integral to your system, and how going to your club is going to benefit their careers in the long term, especially for some of these big players like Ben Chilwell, Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Hakim Ziyech. They want to know that stuff, and I think Frank Lampard, being a former player, I think gets a lot of that stuff, and I think that probably gives him an edge, maybe over some coaches who haven't played the game in the past. That's just something I think as well. I think that's massively integral, and looking forward to how Ben Chilwell, I personally think, and just based on his game as well, I think is going to fit perfectly into Frank Lampard's system. I think the 4-3-3, as I've stated before, I think is going to be a key formation for Frank Lampard moving forward. But I think what Ben Chilwell is going to give to Chelsea is firstly his runs down the left, the acceleration that Chelsea have been missing, getting to the byline and cutting the ball back for attackers. That's something Chelsea have lacked. Acceleration to beat a man, that's something Chelsea just haven't had from fullbacks recently. Marcos Alonso just can't do that. He can get up the pitch, but just from a standing position, being able to take the ball and drive past a player, he can't do that. He doesn't have the acceleration or pace to do that. He's much better suited to be further up the pitch in a 3-4-3 system, where he doesn't have to do that from a standing position when he's in a back four. And that's something Ben Chilwell can definitely offer to Chelsea. Also, the engine Ben Chilwell has to get up and down the pitch, I think, is a big aspect and big positive to his game as well. And the fact that Ben Chilwell stated that Frank Lampard's fullback play very much suits his style, I think once again demonstrates why Frank Lampard wants him at Chelsea next season. Also, I'm really intrigued to see the relationship he's going to have with fellow attackers. We've seen this in his game at Leicester. I'm really intrigued on that left side, especially the sort of the combination play that Ben Chilwell could get into with his fellow attackers. I think the likes of Christian Pulisic, Timo Werner, when he's really bombing down that left side and the way those players are going to work. You especially think Christian Pulisic, who I think is definitely going to dominate that left side for Chelsea, and I think predominantly, majority of the time, Ben Chilwell will be the left back and Christian Pulisic will be the left winger. You're sort of thinking about how those two could interchange movement and link up well. I think that's going to be a really intriguing thing, and I think it's going to be a danger to opposing teams next season. Also, Reece James on the other side. What I want to bring up with Reece James is cutting inside, potentially. We've seen this with Ben Chilwell in his career. He can have the ability to cut inside from the left, not always overlap and then cut back. I think cutting inside is something, and having sort of the protection potentially. I spoke about this with Football Therapy the other week with Ben Chilwell, sort of talking about how potentially to counteract transitions and to help Chelsea get more creative against low blocks, you could see Ben Chilwell and Reece James cutting inside to a more central position to create more crossing opportunities. I think that's something we could see more next season from both of them from full-back play. Also, recovery pace, that's something that's, I think, massive for Chelsea, especially Frank Lampard wanting his attackers and wanting basically his whole team to be on the front foot, move the ball very quickly, a high press, and I think he wants his fullbacks to be very high up the pitch, which is something that Chelsea do have a problem with, especially in moving the other way, transitions. Hopefully with Ben Chilwell's recovery pace, we won't be done as frequently on the break by opposing teams next season. Also, the link up and 1-2s when driving into the box with the likes of Werner, Mount, Pulisic, Giroud, Tammy Havertz. There's so many options now moving forward for Chelsea, and I think it adds a dynamic that Chelsea just haven't had in recent seasons, and I think it's going to cause teams a lot of problems. And I think as Ben Chilwell grows, gets more used to playing with his fellow teammates now, new teammates at Chelsea, I think he's going to grow and get better, and I think that's going to be a big part of Chelsea's creativity next season. So I'm really excited to see Ben Chilwell play for Chelsea. I think he's got all the attributes to add something to Chelsea's left back position that we have not had for a number of years. I think the way he talks, not only about Lampard's influence, the fact that I think the style of Chelsea now suits Ben Chilwell, but also Ashley Cole. I think that was a big part for me as well. Talking about Ashley Cole, the career Ashley Cole had being the best left back for me ever. But I think especially for Chelsea, how amazing he was for that position and how the longevity of Ashley Cole, that was something that was so impressive as well. I think that's something, of course, Ben Chilwell is going to find inspiration from, and the fact he wants to come to Chelsea and replicate what Ashley Cole did, I think is really exciting for fans to hear. And if he can be anything like Ashley Cole, Chelsea have got that position sorted for maybe a decade now. So I think that's a big thing of why this transfer was so important. Please let me know your opinions on Ben Chilwell's first words as a Chelsea player and what do you think he can add to us next season. And lastly, just want to touch on Chelsea's first pre-season friendly being confirmed. It's going to be played at the Amex Stadium on Saturday against Brighton. Bit confusing, to be honest, the fact that we play Brighton in a couple of weeks' time. It's a bit weird that Chelsea, for one of, I think only is going to be a couple of pre-season friendlies. One of them is going to be against our first opponents in the Premier League. That's a bit surprising. And Nazar Kinsella tweeting and confirming this. They're going to have actual fans in the stadium, sort of a trial run to see fans getting back into stadiums soon for football, which I think is a very exciting prospect. And hopefully it goes well, the test run, because then hopefully that will be spread out across grounds in the Premier League, and hopefully we'll be able to go to Stamford Bridge soon again. But Hakim Ziyech and Timo Werner, that's the big thing for me. Will we be seeing Hakim Ziyech and Timo Werner make their first appearances for Chelsea in a warm-up game? Of course, it's not their full debuts, but that's going to be the exciting thing. There's been some confusion over COVID. Apparently, some players having to go into isolation based on a COVID outbreak at Cobham, which I think will probably rule out some of those players. I believe it's Fikayo Tomori, Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, and Christian Pulisic. I'm not sure the legitimacy of those reports, but I think that could rule them out for the game, of course, for Saturday. But just generally seeing the likes of Conor Gallagher potentially getting a run out, Ethan Ampadu. I really hope this game is broadcast in some shape, form or fashion, because I really want to cover it for the channel as well, and hopefully for you guys to be able to see some of these players, especially Werner and Ziyech for the first time, and some of those players like Ethan Ampadu, who I think has got a big chance to break into the first team this season. Hopefully the club will confirm whether this friendly will be broadcast, because I think it'd be brilliant to see even highlights of the game to cover and talk about and discuss with you guys on the channel. But that's the news. Pre-season friendly against Brighton on Saturday as we get closer to the start of the Premier League. But that is it for this edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.